This baby is not mine.
Dr. Nia Holloway learned early in her career that truth did not announce itself with drama. It arrived quietly, often disguised as an anomaly, a decimal point that refused to align, a pattern that should not exist but did. That was how it came to her. Late at night, under fluorescent lab lights that flattened the world into shades of white and gray. The data stared back at her from the screen, unblinking and impossible. She sat perfectly still in her chair, spine straight, shoulders squared, one hand resting lightly on the edge of the desk. Her other hand hovered over the trackpad, unmoving. The hum of the equipment filled the room, steady and indifferent, as if nothing extraordinary had just occurred. This was wrong. Not emotionally wrong, not morally wrong, biologically wrong. Nia had run the sequence 3 times already, once using the primary database, twice using external reference markers she trusted more than most people trusted their own names. Each time the same result surfaced with quiet certainty, like a truth that had been waiting patiently to be found. She exhaled slowly through her nose. 15 years of confirmed sterility did not simply reverse itself, and yet she pushed back from the desk and stood, her movements controlled, deliberate. At 34, Nia carried herself with the composed authority of someone used to being the smartest person in the room without needing to advertise it. Her height, just over 5'7", gave her an elegant presence, accentuated by her posture and the calm economy of her movements. Her skin, a deep warm brown with golden undertones, caught the light softly, highlighting the smooth planes of her cheekbones and the natural texture that spoke of authenticity rather than polish. Her hair was pulled into a low, tightly coiled bun at the nape of her neck, thick 4A curls disciplined into place for long hours of focus. A few wisps had escaped near her temples, softening a face that might otherwise have appeared severe. Her eyes, dark brown, almond-shaped, and unnervingly steady, returned to the screen one final time. The markers did not lie. Whoever had ordered this test had no idea what they had just uncovered. 2 hours later, she sat across from Kang Jun-sok. The room was too quiet. It was not the silence of a hospital or a lab. It was curated silence, thick carpeting, soundproof walls, and an absence of unnecessary objects. The kind of room designed for conversations that never left its confines. Jun-seok occupied the chair opposite her without slouching, without leaning forward, without betraying a single wasted movement. At 44, he looked exactly like a man who had survived long enough to become dangerous. Tall, well over 6 foot, his broad shoulders filled the tailored black suit with an ease that suggested discipline rather than vanity. His skin was pale, cool-toned ivory, unmarked except for the faintest line near his left collarbone, visible only because the top button of his shirt was undone. His face was sharp in a way that made softness feel like a foreign concept. A strong, straight nose, a jawline cut cleanly enough to look sculpted. His lips were thin, controlled, pressed into a neutral line that revealed nothing. His eyes were the most unsettling part, dark, narrow, charcoal brown, and utterly unreadable. They did not wander. They did not blink unnecessarily. They stayed on her with surgical focus. He had not asked her to sit. She had done so anyway. Between them lay a single tablet, screen dark. "You requested a genetic analysis," Nia said calmly, her voice even, professional, American accented without apology. The parameters were narrow. Paternal confirmation only. Jun-seok did not respond. His hands rested on his thighs, large and steady, veins faintly visible beneath pale skin. Hands that had likely signed death warrants and peace deals with the same measured pressure. Nia continued, "I followed protocol, then I went beyond it." That earned her a slight tilt of his head, barely perceptible, the first sign of engagement. "You found something you were not supposed to," he said. It was not a question. "Yes." A pause stretched between them, not awkward, calculated. "You are aware," he said, "that I was declared sterile 15 years ago." "Yes." "Confirmed by 3 independent specialists. Reconfirmed twice. No margin of error." "Yes." His gaze sharpened, fractionally. "Then explain why you are sitting here." Nia met his eyes without flinching. "Because the data contradicts the diagnosis." The air shifted. Not dramatically, subtly, like pressure changing before a storm. That is not possible, Jun Seok said. Nia reached forward and activated the tablet. The screen illuminated, filling the space between them with lines of genetic code, graphs, and annotations. I agree, she said. It shouldn't be. He did not look down immediately. His eyes stayed on her face, searching for something. Fear, ambition, deception? He found none. Her expression remained composed, her full lips relaxed, her breathing steady. Finally, he glanced at the screen. Seconds passed, then minutes. The silence deepened, coiling tighter with every breath. This is a mistake, he said at last. It isn't. You're wrong. I'm not. His gaze snapped back to her, cold and sudden. You are telling me that 15 years of medical certainty is invalid because of one test. Because of 6, Nia corrected softly, across 4 databases. She leaned back slightly, not retreating, simply giving the truth space to exist. And because the biological markers are not ambiguous, they are definitive. Another pause. Say it, he said. Nia did not hesitate. This baby is yours. The words landed without ceremony. For a moment, Jun Seok did not move at all. Then something passed through his eyes, so fast it might have been imagined. Rage, disbelief, something sharper beneath both. You are lying, he said quietly. If I were, Nia replied, you would already be dead certain of it. That earned her the first real reaction. A slow, dangerous smile curved his lips, not with amusement, but with intent. You are very calm, he observed. I'm a geneticist, she said, not a gambler. He stood. The movement was unhurried, but it changed the geometry of the room instantly. He was taller than she had estimated, his presence imposing without aggression. He walked to the window and looked out at the city below, hands clasped behind his back. You understand, he said, what people disappear for? Yes. And you chose to tell me this anyway? Yes. He turned then, eyes locking onto hers again. Why? Nia held his gaze, her heart steady, her trap already set in motion long before this meeting had ever been scheduled. Because, she said evenly, someone already tried to bury this truth, and I don't like being used as cleanup. The silence that followed was no longer empty. It was alive, and somewhere deep within Kong Jun-seok, a certainty he had built his entire life upon began, for the first time, to fracture. The meeting ended without resolution. No threats were made. No orders were given. Kong Jun-seok dismissed everyone in the room with a single look, leaving only Nia and the quiet hum of the city beyond the reinforced glass. When he finally spoke again, his voice was lower, slower, stripped of performance. You will remain available, he said. You will speak to no one about this. Nia rose to her feet smoothly, unruffled. I already anticipated that. His eyes narrowed. You anticipated confinement. I anticipated resistance, she replied. Containment is the usual response when men lose certainty. For a split second, something like amusement flickered across his face. It vanished as quickly as it came. You are not in a position to psychoanalyze me. No, Nia said calmly. I'm in a position to analyze data, and data has a way of surfacing whether you allow it to or not. Jun Seok turned away, signaling the end of the conversation. 2 men appeared at the door immediately, Park Min-chul among them, his sharp gaze flicking to Nia with open distrust. She walked out without being escorted, her heels clicking softly against the floor, every step measured. Her pulse was steady, her breathing even. She had expected disbelief. She had expected anger. What she had not expected was how quickly the machinery would begin to move. By the time Nia returned to her apartment that night, someone had already been there. Nothing was missing, nothing was broken, but the air was wrong, too still, too neat. Her living room window was closed when she always left it cracked. The framed photo on her bookshelf had been straightened. Her laptop sat exactly where she'd left it, but the charging cable had been carefully coiled instead of loosely draped. Someone had searched without leaving fingerprints. Nia closed the door behind her and stood still, taking inventory. Her apartment was small but immaculate, the product of long hours and disciplined habits. Neutral tones, minimal clutter, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She moved through the space, slowly, barefoot, her sharp eyes catching details most people missed. The bathroom medicine cabinet had been opened and closed. Her bedside drawer had been slid out, then pushed back in. They were not looking for valuables. They were looking for leverage. Nia exhaled through her nose and crossed to the kitchen counter, where her phone rested face down. She picked it up and unlocked it with a thumbprint. No missed calls, no messages. Good. She opened a secure folder hidden behind an innocuous calculator app. Inside were time-stamped files, encrypted backups, and correspondence routed through international servers. Work she had started long before Kang Jun-seok ever learned her name. She had not been careless. She had been prepared. Still, she did not sleep that night. The next morning, a black sedan was waiting outside her building. It was not subtle. The car idled at the curb, polished to a mirror shine, its windows tinted so dark they reflected the street instead of revealing its occupants. The driver did not look at her as she approached. He opened the door without a word. "I didn't agree to this," Nia said evenly. "No," Park Min-chul replied from the back seat, his voice clipped. "You didn't." She paused, studying him. Up close, the scar through his left eyebrow gave his otherwise unremarkable face an edge of constant vigilance. He watched her the way a man watches something unpredictable, not with fear but with calculation. "And yet," she said, "here we are." She slid into the car without protest. The ride took them away from the city center, past glass towers and into quieter streets lined with manicured trees and gated entrances. The residence they arrived at was not ostentatious. That was what made it unsettling. High walls, controlled access, minimal visibility. A fortress disguised as restraint. Inside, the space was immaculate, all clean lines and muted colors. Security was present but unobtrusive, men stationed at strategic points like pieces on a chessboard. "This is unnecessary," Nia said as she removed her coat. "I'm not going anywhere." Min-chul's expression did not soften. "People who say that usually are." She turned to face him fully. "Tell me something, Mr. Park. Do you believe the baby is his?" The question caught him off guard. Not enough to show it outright, but enough. "I believe," he said carefully, "that instability invites bloodshed." "That wasn't my question." He studied her for a long moment, then looked away. "Belief is irrelevant. Proof is what matters." "Good," Nia said quietly. "Then you should be very concerned about who ordered the first test." That earned her his full attention. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she continued, "your boss did not request the analysis that started this chain reaction. Someone else did, someone with access to his medical history and the authority to open dormant files." Min-chul's jaw tightened. "You should ask yourself why," she added. "And why now?" He did not respond. Instead, he turned on his heel and left the room. Nia watched him go, her mind already several steps ahead. Across the city, Kang Jun-seok stared at a screen filled with conflicting reports. 3 labs confirmed paternity. 2 raised statistical flags. 1 result had been quietly withdrawn. Someone was manipulating the data. That fact disturbed him more than the pregnancy itself. He had spent 15 years believing his body had failed him, believing the line ended with him, believing that power was the only legacy he could leave behind. Now the foundation of that belief was cracking, and someone was trying to control how far the fractures spread. "Bring me the original medical files," he said into the phone. "Everything, no omissions." A pause. "Yes," he repeated, voice sharpening, "including the sealed ones." He ended the call and leaned back in his chair, eyes closing briefly. For the first time in a very long while, Kang Jun-seok felt something dangerously close to uncertainty. And somewhere in a guarded house across the city, Dr. Nia Holloway sat at a polished dining table sipping water, her hand resting unconsciously over her abdomen. The trap was tightening, and no one yet realized who had set it. The sealed files arrived just after midnight. They were not delivered electronically. Kang Jun-seok did not trust systems that left trails. Instead, a man he had known since childhood placed a slim metal case on the desk in his private office and left without a word. The lock disengaged with a soft click at Jun-seok's thumbprint. Inside were folders yellowed with age, paper records from a time before everything had been digitized and sanitized. The past, preserved the way only secrets ever were. He spread them out methodically. Hospital intake forms, toxicology reports, surgical notes written in careful, slanted handwriting. And beneath them all, a fertility assessment dated 15 years earlier, stamped, signed, and finalized with clinical finality. Sterile. He stared at the word longer than he meant to. The poisoning attempt had nearly killed him. That much he remembered clearly. The fever, the darkness, the weeks lost to fragments of sound and pain. What he did not remember, what he had never questioned, was how quickly the conclusion had been reached afterward. Irreversible damage, no margin of recovery, no need for follow-up. He had accepted it because it suited the world he was building. A man without heirs was easier to control, easier to mythologize, easier to weaponize. His phone buzzed. Park Min-chul's name lit the screen. "Speak," Jun Seok said. "She knows," Min-chul replied. "Not everything, but enough." "Explain." "She knows you didn't order the test, and she knows the results have been touched." Jun Seok's fingers tightened around the phone. "What else?" Min-chul hesitated. "She's not afraid." Silence followed. "Fear," Jun Seok said slowly, "is a currency. People spend it when they have no leverage." "That's what worries me," Min-chul said. The call ended. Jun Seok returned his attention to the files, flipping through them with renewed scrutiny. A notation caught his eye, an addendum appended weeks after the original diagnosis, written by a different hand. The ink was darker, the phrasing less precise. Recommendation: no further testing advised. It was not a conclusion. It was an instruction. Across the city, Nia woke before dawn. She lay still for a moment, listening to the unfamiliar quiet. The house was too insulated, too well designed to allow the city's noise to intrude. She missed the distant sirens and traffic hum of her apartment. Sound, she had learned, was a kind of freedom. She rose slowly, stretching her back, one hand braced against her lower spine. Her pregnancy was still early, not yet visible beneath loose clothing, but she felt it in subtle ways, an unfamiliar heaviness, a heightened awareness of her own body. She dressed simply, soft slacks, a fitted sweater, bare feet against cool stone floors. As she moved through the kitchen, she noted the placement of the cameras, reflected faintly in the glass surfaces. She catalogued blind spots instinctively. A woman who expected to survive learned to see everything. She poured herself tea and carried it to the long dining table, where she opened her tablet and accessed a secure channel. Messages blinked into view, routed through layers of encryption. She read them without surprise. One lab had flagged sample contamination. Another had requested re-verification of the paternal source. A third had gone silent altogether. They were trying to collapse the truth into confusion. She smiled faintly. They were late. Nia initiated a call, routing it through a university server in the Midwest, then bouncing it overseas. When the line connected, the face that appeared on her screen was weary but alert. "Dr. Holloway," the man said. "I was wondering when you'd reach out." "Dr. Roth," she replied. "I assume you've seen the renewed interest in a 15-year-old diagnosis." His jaw tightened. "I have. And? And someone doesn't want it revisited." "Someone rarely does," Nia said calmly. "Tell me, were you pressured when you signed off on it?" A long pause. "I was told," Roth said carefully, "that further testing would endanger lives, mine included." "Did you believe the diagnosis was final?" "I believed," he said quietly, "that I was being told what to conclude." Nia closed her eyes for a brief moment, absorbing the confirmation. "Thank you," she said. "I'll need an affidavit." There was no hesitation this time. "I'll prepare it." The call ended. Nia set the tablet down and took a sip of her tea. It had gone cold. Later that day, Kong Jun-seok arrived unannounced. The guards did not announce him. They simply stepped aside. Nia was standing by the window when she sensed him behind her, his presence altering the space, the way a storm altered air pressure. "You should not be here," she said without turning. "And yet," he replied, echoing her words from the day before, "here I am." She faced him slowly. Up close, the tension in his face was unmistakable. The control remained, but it was strained now, pulled taut over something volatile. His eyes searched hers, not for fear, but for confirmation. "You knew," he said. "Yes." "How long?" "Before you did. You withheld that information." "I protected it," she corrected. "There's a difference." His gaze dropped briefly. To her abdomen, to the place where something fragile and dangerous existed because of choices made long before either of them consented to this collision. "You set this in motion," he said. "I responded to it," Nia replied. Someone else pulled the first string. Silence fell again, heavy but no longer empty. "You are not my enemy," he said at last. "No," she agreed. "But I'm not your asset either." He studied her, really studied her, as if seeing her clearly for the first time, not as a variable to be managed, but as a force operating on her own trajectory. "What do you want?" he asked. Nia met his gaze, her expression steady, her voice unyielding. "The truth," she said, "and the assurance that no one else disappears because it's inconvenient." Something shifted then, deep and irrevocable. Kang Jun-seok had spent his life mastering leverage. For the first time, he realized he was facing someone who understood it just as well, and was willing to burn it all to protect what mattered. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that a carefully constructed myth was unraveling, and at the center of it, a child not yet born had already begun to rewrite the balance of power. The assurance did not come immediately. Kang Jun-seok did not make promises lightly, and when he did, they were never spoken in moments of pressure. He left the residence without another word, his departure as controlled as his arrival. But something fundamental had shifted. The guards did not tighten their formation afterward. If anything, they gave Nia more space. That alone told her everything. The following days unfolded with deceptive calm. Nia was not confined, but she was not free. The house remained her perimeter, yet its boundaries loosened in subtle ways. Her meals were no longer pre-selected. She was asked, not told, what she preferred. A vehicle was placed at her disposal, its driver instructed to follow her directions, not dictate them. Control was being renegotiated. She used the time carefully. Each morning, she took long walks through the grounds, committing routes and sightlines to memory. Each afternoon, she worked from the study, reviewing data, cross-checking timelines, and quietly expanding her network of verification beyond the reach of Korean medical systems. She slept lightly, waking often, her senses tuned to shifts in sound and rhythm. At night, she thought about the women who had come before her. 2 names surfaced from sealed hospital admissions, stripped of context, erased from public record. Both had disappeared within weeks of their pregnancies being confirmed. Both cases had been resolved internally, signed off as misinformation. Nia knew what that meant. The realization did not frighten her. It hardened her resolve. On the 4th day, Park Min-chul returned. He stood in the doorway of the study, arms crossed, his expression more guarded than hostile. He did not bother pretending this was a casual visit. "You were right," he said. Nia looked up from her screen. "About which part?" "The test," he replied. "And the files." She waited. "There were 2 other women," Min-chul continued. "Both claimed paternity. Both were handled." Nia closed her laptop slowly. Handled by whom? His jaw flexed. Not by him. That mattered. "Do you know what scares people more than a lie?" Nia asked quietly. Min-chul frowned. "Truth." "No," she corrected. "A truth that proves they've been controlled." He said nothing. "You and I both know this didn't start with Kang Jun-seok," she went on. "He was shaped by the lie as much as anyone, maybe more." Min-chul studied her for a long moment. "You don't speak like someone trying to survive." "I am surviving," Nia replied. "I'm just not doing it quietly." That night, the attack came without warning. It was not loud, not chaotic, it was precise. Nia was in the kitchen, rinsing a cup, when the lights flickered once, just enough to register as wrong. She froze instantly, her body responding before her thoughts caught up. The power cut out completely. A second later, she moved. Not toward the door, toward the corner, where the counters created a blind spot from the main entrance. Her heart pounded, but her breathing stayed controlled. She counted seconds, listened. Footsteps, soft, measured, more than one. They were inside. The sound of glass breaking came from the far end of the house. Deliberate misdirection. Someone wanted her to panic, to run. She didn't. Instead, she reached into the drawer beneath the sink and wrapped her fingers around the cold metal she'd found there 2 days earlier. Not a weapon meant for combat. A deterrent, a signal. She didn't have to use it. The house exploded into motion. Shouts in Korean cut through the darkness. Bodies collided, a sharp crack echoed, followed by another. Within seconds, the lights surged back on. Nia remained exactly where she was. Park Min-chul appeared first, blood streaking one side of his jaw. Behind him came two guards, dragging a man whose face was already swelling, his hands zip-tied behind his back. Kang Jun-seok arrived last. He took in the scene in a single sweep. Nia unharmed, the intruder restrained, the damage contained. His gaze lingered on her longer than anything else. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No," she said simply. His attention snapped to the man on the floor. "Who sent you?" Jun-seok asked. The man laughed weakly, blood pooling at the corner of his mouth. "You know who?" Jun-seok's expression did not change, but something dangerous settled into his eyes. "Take him," he said. "Alive!" The man was hauled away, screaming. When the room finally emptied, only Nia and Jun-seok remained. He turned to her slowly. "You should be afraid." "I am," Nia replied. "Of what happens if this keeps getting buried?" He studied her, then nodded once. "It ends now," he said. Not as a promise, as a decision. By morning, the first arrest would be made. By nightfall, the myth of Kang Jun-seok's sterility would no longer belong to those who had weaponized it. And Nia Holloway, standing at the center of a storm she had deliberately drawn toward herself, knew the most dangerous phase was just beginning. Morning arrived with consequences. The arrest did not make the news. It never would. Men like Kang Jun-seok did not allow their internal fractures to become public spectacle, but within the circles that mattered, the elders, the financiers, the men who had built their power on carefully managed narratives, the message landed hard. Someone had crossed a line. Nia watched the shift happen from the periphery. By mid-morning, the house felt different, tighter, purposeful. Guards moved with urgency instead of routine. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms, not because she was excluded, but because she was now central to what could not be spoken openly. She felt it, in the way eyes tracked her, in the way doors opened faster, in the subtle recalibration of respect. She was no longer a problem to be contained. She was a variable to be protected. Kang Jun-seok did not return immediately after the night's events. When he did, it was hours later, his jacket gone, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms, etched with faint scars, old, deliberate, earned. He looked less like a king and more like a man who had been awake too long, making decisions that could not be undone. "Come with me," he said, stopping just short of a command. Nia followed him into a private office she hadn't yet been allowed to enter. The room was smaller than she expected. No grand desk, no art meant to impress. Just shelves lined with carefully labeled folders, and a single table in the center. On it lay documents spread in deliberate order. "These are the disappearances," he said. "The women." Nia approached slowly. 2 names, 2 dates, 2 pregnancy confirmations, followed by sealed outcomes. The paper smelled faintly of age and smoke. "They were silenced," Nia said. "They were erased," Jun-seok corrected. "By people who believed they were protecting me." "Were they?" His jaw tightened. "They believed they were protecting the family." She met his gaze. "There's a difference." He did not argue. Instead, he pushed another file toward her. Inside was a familiar letterhead. Dr. Samuel Roth. "You spoke to him," Jun-seok said. "Yes." "He's willing to testify." "He's willing to tell the truth," Nia replied. "Those are not always the same thing." Jun-seok's eyes flicked to her again, measuring. "You knew this would escalate." "Yes." "You knew people would die." Nia held his gaze steadily. "I knew people already had." Silence stretched between them, dense but not hostile. For the first time, he did not look like a man in control. He looked like a man confronting the possibility that everything he had built rested on an engineered lie. "They took something from me," he said quietly, "and I let them." "You didn't know," Nia said. "I didn't question," he corrected. "That's worse." She stepped closer, not to comfort him, but to ground the moment in reality. "This doesn't end with exposure," she said. "It ends with choice. You can reclaim the narrative, or you can let it consume you." "And what do you want?" he asked again. Nia placed a hand flat over the folder containing the women's names. "I want them acknowledged," she said. "I want the truth recorded where it can't be buried again. And I want my child protected, not hidden." His gaze dropped briefly, then returned to her face. "You will have that," he said. "All of it." This time, it was a promise. The backlash came from within. That afternoon, Madame Kang Yunhua summoned him. Nia did not attend the meeting, but she felt its impact ripple through the house. The air grew brittle. Voices carried further than intended. Old power threatened, always made noise. When Jun Seok returned, his expression was unreadable. "They want you gone," he said without preamble. "Gone how?" Nia asked. He did not answer immediately. "That depends," he said finally, "on whether you remain inconvenient." Nia laughed softly, without humor. "I passed inconvenient days ago." "They want the child disavowed." "No. They want you relocated, overseas, quietly." "No. They want me to reaffirm the diagnosis." She met his eyes sharply. "That would be a lie." "Yes," he agreed. "It would." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Jun Seok straightened. "They underestimated you," he said, "and they underestimated what I would do once the truth was undeniable." He turned toward the door. "Pack what you need." Nia's pulse quickened. "Where are we going?" "To confront them," he replied. "Publicly." Her breath caught, not with fear, but with recognition. "You're choosing exposure," she said. "I'm choosing control," he corrected. "On my terms." As they left the room together, Nia felt the weight of the moment settle fully into her chest. The trap she had set was no longer closing quietly. It was snapping shut, and once it did, there would be no way back for any of them. The confrontation did not take place in a courtroom or a boardroom. It took place in a room designed for permanence. The Kang family estate stood on elevated ground outside the city, its architecture blending old authority with modern fortification. Stone and glass, tradition reinforced by surveillance. It was a place meant to remind anyone who entered that power had roots, and those roots ran deep. Nia felt it the moment she stepped through the gates. The air was different here, thicker, weighted with memory. Generations of decisions had been made within these walls, some noble, many ruthless. She kept her posture tall, her stride measured, her expression neutral. She wore a tailored coat that concealed her frame without erasing it, her natural coils pulled back into a sleek, braided style that framed her face with quiet elegance. No jewelry beyond a simple band at her wrist, nothing that could be interpreted as submission or provocation. Kang Jun Seok walked beside her, close enough that his presence was unmistakable but not possessive. That, she knew, was deliberate. They entered together. Madame Kang Yun-hwa sat at the head of the long table, her posture immaculate, her silver-streaked hair swept back with ceremonial precision. The elders flanking her were men and women who had shaped the syndicate long before Jun Seok inherited it. Their eyes followed Nia with thinly veiled disdain. "You brought her here," Yunhua said coolly. "That is bold." "She is part of this," Jun Seok replied, "whether you like it or not." Yunhua's gaze shifted to Nia. "You have caused considerable disruption." Nia inclined her head slightly. "Truth often does." A murmur rippled around the table. "This is not a court," Yunhua said. "We do not debate facts here. We manage outcomes." "That philosophy," Nia replied evenly, "is why people disappeared." The room went silent. Jun Seok did not interrupt. Yunhua's eyes hardened. "You presume much." "I presume documentation," Nia said, "and patterns." She reached into her bag and placed a slim folder on the table. Not thick, not dramatic, just enough. Inside were affidavits, lab confirmations, and timelines mapped with clinical precision. She did not slide them toward the elders. She left them where they were. "You've been controlling the narrative around Kang Jun Seok's fertility for 15 years, Nia continued, "not to protect him, but to control succession. Any pregnancy outside your design was eliminated." "That is a lie," one elder snapped. "No," Jun Seok said quietly, "it isn't." Every head turned. Yunhua stared at him, incredulous. "You would take the word of an outsider over your own blood?" "I am taking the word of evidence," he replied. "Something you taught me to respect." The silence that followed was brittle. "You will destroy everything," Yunhua said. "This family survives because we are disciplined." "This family survives because people believe in it," Jun Seok countered. "And belief does not survive lies forever." Yunhua's gaze flicked once more at Nia's abdomen. "That child," she said, "is a liability." Jun Seok stepped forward. "That child," he said evenly, "is my heir." The room erupted. Voices overlapped. Protests rang out. Accusations flew. The elders demanded retractions, containment, silence. Nia did not speak again. She didn't need to, because the shift had already occurred. Jun Seok stood unyielding, a man who had chosen to fracture his own myth rather than live inside it. When the room finally quieted, it was not because consensus had been reached, but because power had moved. "You have a choice," he said. "Adapt or become obsolete." Yunhua studied him for a long moment, then leaned back slowly. "This is not over," she said. "No," he agreed. "It isn't." They left without permission. Outside, the air felt lighter, though the consequences ahead loomed heavy. As they walked toward the waiting car, Nia finally exhaled the breath she'd been holding. "You just declared war," she said softly. "I ended one," Jun Seok replied. "Another will follow." She looked at him, then really looked. Not as a mafia boss, not as a threat, but as a man dismantling the structure that had shaped him. "You didn't have to bring me," she said. "Yes," he replied. "I did." The car door closed behind them, sealing off the estate and its ghosts. Ahead lay uncertainty, backlash, and danger. But for the first time since the impossible truth surfaced under fluorescent lights, Nia felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Momentum. The retaliation came quietly, not with gunfire or explosions, but with bureaucracy, frozen accounts, delayed shipments, whispers seeded into the right ears. The kind of violence that didn't draw blood, but tightened nooses. Kang Jun Seok recognized it immediately. This was Yunhua's domain. Old power preferred suffocation to spectacle. Nia felt it in subtler ways. Her credentials were questioned. A journal she'd been scheduled to publish in requested additional verification. An academic conference quietly withdrew her invitation. Nothing explicit, nothing provable. Just pressure, applied precisely where it hurt. "You're being isolated," Jun Seok said one evening as they sat across from each other in the study, the city lights reflecting faintly in the glass behind him. "They're trying," Nia replied. "Isolation only works when people don't leave trails." He studied her, the lines of fatigue more visible now. "You anticipated this?" "Yes." "And you still move forward?" "Yes." A beat. "You are either very brave," he said, "or very dangerous." Nia met his gaze steadily. "Those aren't opposites." The following morning, she received the message she'd been waiting for. A single line routed through 3 servers and a dormant university account. Affidavit complete. Copies distributed. She closed her eyes briefly. That afternoon, Kang Jun Seok convened a meeting. Not with the elders, but with the syndicate's operational core. Men who moved money, logistics, influence. Men who valued stability over tradition. Nia was not present, but she felt the outcome ripple outward like a pressure wave. Vehicles returned to circulation. Accounts unfroze. A rival syndicate's probe stalled inexplicably. Someone had chosen a side. That night, Jun Seok found her on the terrace. She stood barefoot on the cool stone, wrapped in a light shawl, one hand resting at her side, the other loosely cradling her abdomen. The city stretched out before them, vast and indifferent. "They're preparing a final move," he said. "Public or private?" she asked. "Public," he replied. "They'll try to discredit you." Nia nodded once. "Good." He frowned slightly. "That's not the response I expected." "They need me to be silent," she said, "or erratic, or compromised. A public attack gives me a platform." "You're willing to stand in front of them?" "I already am." A pause settled between them, different from before. Less adversarial, still charged. "You could leave," he said quietly. "I would make sure you were untouchable." Nia turned to him slowly. "And let them rewrite this again?" He held her gaze. "I won't force you." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm staying." The public strike came 2 days later. An anonymous report leaked to international media questioning the validity of Nia's research, implying ethical violations and personal entanglement. The story spread quickly, packaged with just enough ambiguity to invite doubt. Nia watched it unfold without panic. Within hours, she released everything, not a statement, not a defense, data, time-stamped records, independent lab, confirmations, Dr. Roth's affidavit, corroborating evidence from two other medical professionals whose silence had been bought years earlier, and who now spoke because the power protecting the lie had fractured. The narrative collapsed under its own weight. By nightfall, the story was no longer about scandal. It was about erasure, the women, the manipulation, the dynasty that had engineered infertility to control succession. Kang Eun-hwa did not respond publicly. She didn't need to. The message arrived through intermediaries instead. "You've gone too far." Jun Seok read it once, then deleted it. "It's done," he said. "For you," Nia replied. "For them, it's just beginning." He studied her. Something unspoken passing between them. Respect. Recognition. Perhaps something more dangerous. "You changed the board," he said. "No," she corrected softly. "I revealed it." Below them, the city pulsed on, unaware of the quiet revolution unfolding in its shadow. And somewhere, within that shifting landscape, a future was being claimed. Not through fear, but through truth. The fallout did not arrive all at once. It arrived in fragments. Resignations first, quiet ones. Advisors stepping down for health reasons. Board members suddenly unreachable. Long-standing alliances dissolving without explanation. The Kang Syndicate did not collapse, but it changed shape, shedding the parts that had relied too heavily on secrecy and inherited authority. Kang Jun-seok watched it happen with a calm that surprised even himself. He had spent his life believing control meant preventing fracture. Now he understood it meant surviving one. The final meeting with Eun-hwa never happened. By the time he was prepared to confront her again, she had retreated from public view, her influence reduced to whispers and proxies. Power like hers did not disappear. It waited, but it no longer dictated the present. That mattered. Nia felt the shift more personally. The retraction came first, then the apology, then the invitation, tentative, careful, worded, to suggest inevitability rather than admission of wrongdoing. Her work was reinstated. Her credibility, once questioned, was now sought after. She declined most of it. Instead, she returned to her research on her own terms, setting up a small, independent lab with funding that arrived without conditions. She kept her days structured, her nights quiet. She listened to her body more closely now, aware of the life developing within her, steady and persistent. One evening, as rain traced slow paths down the glass walls of the terrace, Kang Jun-seok joined her without announcement. She sensed him before she turned. "It's over," he said. She didn't ask what he meant. Some endings announced themselves without explanation. "For now," she replied. He nodded. "For now?" They stood side by side, the space between them comfortable, unclaimed, the city reflected in the dark glass, their silhouettes overlapping without merging. "You could have taken more," he said after a while. "Protection, influence, anything." Nia looked at him. "I took what I needed." "And what was that?" She placed her hand over her abdomen, her expression soft but resolute. "Agency." He studied her, then inclined his head slightly, a gesture of respect rather than ownership. "I don't know how to be what comes next," he said quietly. "You don't have to decide that tonight," she replied. "Or alone." That, she knew, was as close to an offer as he would ever make. The next morning, Nia woke to sunlight spilling across the room, warm and unhurried. She lay still for a moment, listening to the rhythm of the house, to her own breathing, to the subtle reassurance of continuity. The world had not ended. It had shifted. Somewhere ahead lay consequences she could not yet see. Questions of legacy, of visibility, of what it meant to raise a child born into a truth that had cost others their silence. None of it was simple, none of it was guaranteed, but it was hers. And as she rose and began another day, Dr. Nia Holloway knew one thing with absolute clarity. She had never been trapped. She had been preparing the ground.